Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
All right. Continuation of the cardiovascular system. And I think I will be winding up with this as per your, going as per your syllabus. I think we have very little topics to cover. And this is one important topic. Okay. Anyway, I'll be checking again the syllabus and see if there is anything more to be covered in CVS, cardiovascular system. Okay. So we had spoken of many things, cardiac output and control of cardiovascular system, isn't it? And today we will be talking about the control of arterial blood pressure. Okay, so what is blood pressure? You go by this definition. All right, it's a force exerted by circulating blood on artery walls. Okay, so it's a measurement of the force applied to the artery wall. When you look at the flow of blood along the blood vessel, you have, you find that you have to think like a plumber. You will see that, the when the blood is flowing, it's exerting a pressure. One pressure is called as the end pressure. That means the head end pressure, all right, which is at the head of the, fluid that is flowing, head end, or the head end of the fluid that is flowing. That is called as the end pressure. And we go by what Bernoulli, a scientist in, I think he's a physicist who described what these different type of pressures in the, not in the vascular system, but in the, in the pipeline system. Okay. So anyway, you have one is the head end pressure, sorry, the end pressure, and the other is the lateral pressure. Now you see, uh, end pressure is slightly more than lateral pressure, but it is not so significantly, different that we can think of, you can take of them as, different pressures. We can take them as equal. Okay. So what we are measuring, the pressure that we are measuring using the instruments that we are actually not measuring the end pressure, we are measuring the lateral pressure. That means the pressure exerted on the wall of the blood vessels. Okay. So on the wall of the artery. Okay. So that is the pressure that we are all talking about. Okay, and this is otherwise called as the arterial blood pressure because it's the pressure exerted on the arterial wall, and what we are measuring is that pressure exerted on the arterial wall. Okay, so you'll find that this pressure, all right, resulting as a result of flow of blood through the blood vessels, all right, is equal to the output. That means the output that's coming from the heart, or the flow we can say, all right, which is equal to the flow. It's into, or we can say a multiple of the cardiac output and the peripheral vascular resistance. That means when you talk of resistance, you're talking about the characteristic of the liquid that is flowing, one, and two, the the vascular system through which it is flowing. All right, the characteristic of the vascular system through which it is flowing. So what is the characteristic of the blood that is flowing? I mean of the liquid that is flowing. Here it is a blood. And blood, contains all these form and unformed elements. And, these form elements would, like the blood cells, all right, would offer the blood some amount of viscosity. Okay, some amount of viscosity. When you look at the characteristic of the blood vessel, you'll find that blood vessel is basically having some features. One is that it has a diameter, okay, so a diameter and a length. Okay, so these are some features that would be affecting the flow, all right, or that would affect the flow and generate the pressure. Okay, so we see here that pressure is generated by these two things. One is the flow, and two is the pressure. Sorry, two is the resistance. Okay, so by the resistance, I mean to say. Okay, so the flow and the resistance. All these characteristics of the blood vessels and the blood itself that is flowing through the blood vessel, all right, generate what we call as a resistance. Okay, so the resistance plus the flow generates the pressure. You understand? So that means the resistance, a multiple of the resistance and the flow generate the pressure, what we call is the arterial blood pressure. So the pressure at the end of the head end of the blood that is flowing, or a pressure that is exerted on the lateral wall of the blood vessel, that is the pressure that is generated by the cardiac output and the peripheral vascular resistance. Okay, so this is what we call as the blood pressure. Okay, so we can see here, flow, which is the cardiac output. All right, we have already seen in the earlier slide that blood pressure or arterial blood pressure is a multiple of cardiac output and peripheral vascular resistance. And you will see that the flow, what we call as the cardiac output, is again determined by these two things. One is the pressure difference across the vascular system and the resistance. Okay, so this gives us the it is kind of a formula of the flow. Actually, we come back to this and when we go into physics, actually you find this a similar law. Probably we have derived this also from that. It's called as the Ohm's law. Okay, so anyway, the pressure gradient is generated because of a difference in the pressure at 2 points. Okay, first point is from where the flow begins to where the flow ends. The second point is where the flow ends. So the difference of this give you what we call as a pressure difference. We see this thing also in the vascular system, cardiovascular system, that there is a pressure difference, across the circulatory system. As you can see here, the left atrium generally have an mean arterial pressure of say 93 millimeters of mercury. Okay, an average of 93 millimeters of mercury. Then at the end of it we have the right atrium, all right, because blood is going to be pumped from the left ventricle, goes through the systemic circulation, and then comes to the right atrium, comes back to the heart through the right atrium. Okay, you'll find that the pressure in the right atrium is only 0 millimeters of mercury. Okay, so we have pressure difference, and this is important. Pressure difference is important in determining the flow. If you don't have a pressure difference, then there will be no flow. In order to have a flow, there should be a pressure difference, and we have a very large pressure difference here in the vascular system between the left ventricle and the right atrium. So same between the right ventricle and the left atrium, there will be a pressure difference, and that results in the flow. Okay, so the pressure difference is important for determining the flow. All right, but then you have to take the resistance also into consideration, because again, as I've said earlier, there are some characteristics of the vascular system that results in the generation of resistance. Okay, clear? So anyway, these are some of the hemodynamics, we can say, of the cardiovascular system. So here again, same, you have a pressure difference which is called a gradient. Okay, and resistance determined by diameter of the blood vessel, the length of the blood vessel, and of course the nature of the blood that is flowing through the blood vessel. So when we talk of arterial blood pressure, and why we have to know the physiology of blood pressure, is that in today's world we come across a condition of hypertension, which is causing a huge burden to the a global burden. All right, it's everywhere that people are suffering from hypertension. So and we have seen that hypertension can be caused by a change in these dynamics. Okay, it can be a cardiac output issue, or it can be the resting issue, or because the vascular wall, the cardiovascular system as a whole, as a result of many factors, maybe a lifestyle problem, it may be caused by some disease, right? I'll come to this. What are the causes of hypertension? But then would result in a change in the cardiovascular system structure. Okay. For example, the vascular system or the blood vessels, they would undergo thickening, and thickening of the wall would result in a reduction of the diameter, as you can see here. Here it's normal. This is the diameter, and this is the wall thickness. Here you can see that it is undergoing, you know, thickening, and it's causing a reduction in diameter. And this is, uh, causing an increase in the peripheral vascular resistance, which results into an increased pressure. Okay, so this is one, I mean, by just looking at all these hemodynamics of, you know, the flow of blood in the cardiovascular system, we can think of the pathophysiology of hypertension, as in this case, in this scenario where it is a thickening of the wall, which is causing a decreased diameter, increasing the resistance. Okay, so you would require more force. I mean, more forced contraction by the heart to pump an adequate amount of cardiac output. Okay, so hypertension is oftenly caused by this. All right, a change in the diameter. It can be caused by what we call as atherosclerosis, deposition of the cholesterol, isn't it, in the wall of the blood vessel. And here, even inactivity, that means physical inactivity, would also have an impact on the wall, and stress as well can reduce as a result of chemical signals that causes contraction of the blood vessels, or constriction rather, I would say constriction of the blood vessel. That would result in decreased diameter and increased resistance, and therefore leads to an increased pressure. And these are some of the basic causes of what we call as hypertension. All right. So hypertension is, we say the normal blood pressure is 120 by 80. We measure blood pressure by taking into consideration the two pressures, one pressure at systole and one pressure at diastole. The systolic blood pressure of 120 and the diastolic blood pressure of 80, that is considered to be normal. Or some people give a range, as in some of the physiology textbook, you have a range, and 80 to 90 considered to be a normal diastolic blood pressure, and 100 to 140 is considered to be uh, a normal systolic blood pressure. Okay. But anyway, I don't know whether I've kept the classification of hypertension here or not, but I guess yes. Okay, we'll come to this. So, blood pressure, therefore, is a component of systolic and diastolic. The systolic of 120 and diastolic of 80 is the normal blood pressure. Now, how do you measure blood pressure? You have this instrument that is called a sphygmomanometer. Okay, so it can be mercurial, it can be electronic, it can be digital. All right, in this case it's electronic, so it's giving a measurement of 120 by 80. And when you measure the blood pressure, you must ensure that this instrument is kept at the level of the heart. Okay, and especially when you're measuring with mercurial type of sphygmomanometer. Now, the picture is also showing you that systolic pressure is when the heart is in the phase of contraction, and diastolic blood pressure is when the heart is in the phase of filling. So this is the filling phase, and this is the ejection phase. All right, or this is the contraction phase, this is the relaxation phase. Okay, so we are getting different pressures during different phases of the cardiac cycle. Okay, but then we take this as a normal pressure, 120 in systole and 80 in diastole. Clear? So anyway, regarding measurement of blood pressure, you probably will have a practical session for it. I think you do it. I think you probably have it, and you will come to know the characteristic of the blood pressure, cough, right? the length, the width and all that of the cuff is also important to measure people of different ages. And yes, so these are some of the things that you'll be learning in practicals. But you have this instrument that measures the pressure. Okay, so here just showing you that three methods are there to measure the blood pressure. One is called as an auscultatory method, and then you have palpatory method, and the third is the oscillatory method. All these again you'll be learning in the practical sessions. Okay, so anyway, we were talking about the normal pressure. I said it's 120 by 80, and there was a range that I was talking to you. But then some guidelines has come up, new guidelines. Okay, and I think this is coming from the American Heart Association. As you can see here, the source is AHA, American Heart Association. And then the guideline has, classified, rather categorized, okay, blood pressure into different stages. So 120 by 80 is said to be normal. 120 to 129 systolic. Systolic is somewhere around 120 to 129, and diastolic is say around 80 or less than 80. Is still considered to be elevated. Right? It's considered to be elevated. So elevated pressure. And when systolic is 130 to 139 and diastolic is in between 80 and 89, that is called to be stage 1 hypertension. Okay, so stage 1 hypertension. So a pre-hypertension is when the blood pressure reading is 120 to 139 and a diastolic pressure is between 80 and 89. So these two stages are considered to be pre-hypertensive stages. All right. So you can call these elevated as and stage 1 as the pre-hypertension stages. But then in stage 2 you'll find that systolic is more than 140 and diastolic the least is 90 millimeters of mercury. So this is stage 2. And when when systolic is more than 180 and diastolic is more than 120, that is said to be a malignant type of hypertension, or it is called as a hypertensive crisis, which needs immediate attention, okay, medical attention. All right, and immediate hospitalization. And you have to see for organ damage, signs of organ damage, and all that. Patient has to be assessed and treated accordingly. Okay, so these are different stages of hypertension, and you must keep this in mind. This is from a very important source, credible source. Okay, so again coming back to the physiology of blood pressure, all right, what we call is the mean arterial pressure. As I've said, the determinants of mean arterial blood pressure are derived from a physical law which we call as the Ohm's law. Okay, so there is a voltage is equal to current into resistance. Okay, and voltage is a difference, kind of a potential difference or kind of pressure difference. Okay, and current is something like a flow, and of course the resistance is the resistance only. And we know that in mean arterial, in the cardiovascular system, we have mean arterial pressure as that pressure difference, and cardiac output as form of flow or current, and the resistance is represented by the total peripheral resistance. Okay, so when we talk of control of mean arterial pressure, okay, we are going to talk about these two determinants: the cardiac output and the total peripheral resistance. Okay, this is a very important, very important relation that you must remember. And we have seen in the earlier class that cardiac output is nothing but a multiple of heart rate and stroke volume. So we can derive another relation where we can say mean arterial blood pressure is equal to the multiple of heart rate and stroke volume and the total peripheral resistance. Okay. So whatever controls heart rate, stroke volume, total peripheral resistance will control the mean arterial blood pressure. That is the bottom line. Understand? Whatever controls these these determinants noted here in this relation will be the factors that control the mean arterial pressure. So I think, I don't know whether I have told you last time about, the uh, how you derive mean arterial blood pressure. Mean arterial blood pressure is nothing but, diastolic blood pressure plus one third of pulse pressure. And pulse pressure is nothing but the difference of systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure. So you have a number of terms with relation to blood pressure. One is the mean arterial blood pressure, which you have to remember the formula. Diastolic blood pressure, which is somewhere around say 80 to 90, plus one third pulse pressure. And pulse pressure is nothing but as a difference of systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure. Normally, systolic blood pressure is 120, diastolic blood pressure is 80, and so the pulse pressure is 40. Okay, so one third 40. So you can say 90, say 80 plus one third 40. Whatever you get from that calculation is the mean arterial blood pressure. So when we talk of control of blood pressure, we will always talk of the mean arterial blood pressure. Okay, we are going to take the mean arterial blood pressure into consideration. And another thing which you may have to remember, besides the mean arterial blood pressure, the pulse pressure, there's something called the basal pressure. It's a pressure that you measure, when a person is physically at rest, mentally and physically at rest, and he's on, and been fasted for 12 hours. Okay, fasted and rested for 12 hours. Anyway, coming back to the two determinants, blood pressure we say is determined by cardiac output and peripheral resistance. And I've told you that you have all these factors controlling these two factors, controlling these two determinants. So your heart rate and stroke volume control cardiac output. So they are going to determine the cardiac output. Alright? And then peripheral resistance will be determined by the nature of the blood that is flowing through it, through the vascular system, and of course the characteristics of the blood vessels. Alright, so the arteriolar radius, the length and all that, but in this case we are not going to take length into consideration. We are going to be focusing on the radius of the vascular wall. Okay, so you see heart rate is again determined by parasympathetic. Sympathetic is going to increase the heart rate, is going to increase the force of contraction, therefore increase stroke volume as well. Parasympathetic is going to put the heart into a resting state, and it's going to decrease the heart rate. So decrease not only the rate of contraction but the force of contraction as well. Stroke volume again is determined by contractility and something that we call as a preload or end diastolic volume. This is a volume that is present in the heart, all right, at the end of filling stage. That means at the end of the diastole, all right, somewhere in between the end of the diastole and beginning of the systole. Whatever volume that is filled in the heart at that point of time, that is called as the end diastolic blood volume. Now this volume, the end diastolic blood volume, is determined by the venous return. Okay, so the venous return is a flow of blood from the systemic circulation, from the pulmonary circulation into the heart. Okay, but when we talk of the heart, we generally think of the systemic circulation. Okay, so anyway, venous return is the amount of blood that is returning back to the heart, isn't it? Flows back into the atrium, all right, basically the right atrium. Okay, and that is determined by a number of things. One is we have already seen the earlier slides where we say the pressure difference determines the flow of blood from the left ventricle to the right atrium. So one can be that. So that can be called as a cardiac suction. Okay, it's because of the pressure difference. And two is cardiac suction can be that, and then it can be also the emptied or the fall in the pressure, the fall of pressure to the extent that it causes the kind of a suction force. It's nothing but the pressure difference, okay, that is creating this cardiac suction. Then the respiratory pump, the muscle pump, When you move, right, the muscles are going to pump the blood vessels and cause the blood to return to the heart. Respiratory pump is nothing but, you're inspiring. When you're inspiring, there is increased negativity in the thoracic cavity, and this allows the, and this, allows of, flow of blood from the periphery into the heart. Okay, it's kind of a pump again here, where it sucks, because of the negative pressure that is created in the thoracic cavity. And of course, sympathetic, all right, vasoconstrictor tone is another cause for uh, where the veins are constricted, and this resulting in the pushing of the blood from the veins into the heart. Okay, then gravity itself also plays a role, causing pulling, and and uh, the valves also you must take into consideration, because they are important in ensuring that the blood is flow. I mean, the blood flows in one direction from the periphery to the right atrium. Okay, it's like a staircase system, where every time the blood is dislocated from the periphery into the closer to the right atrium, the valves are going to close. They will inhibit the backflow of the blood as a result of gravity, because gravity is there, and it has to be system has to be anti-gravity, and that is brought about by the presence of the valves, the valvular system. Of course, you have other things like the mean systemic filling pressure, that is again determined by the pressure difference again, and the blood volume. Okay, so that would result in the increased venous return and result in the development of what we call as the end diastolic blood volume, that will determine the stroke volume. The more the end diastolic volume, the more would be the stroke volume. That is determined by a law that we call as the Frank-Starling's. Okay. So you see, these are all factors, affecting cardiac output. And now these are all factors affecting the particular viscosity and radius, which is determined by vasodilators and vasoconstrictors. The constrictors are epinephrine, norepinephrine, endothelin, sympathetic stimulation, antidiuretic hormone, okay, which is also called as a vasopressin. Okay, so these are all chemicals that result in vasoconstriction, and therefore decreases the radius of the arteries, and increases the resistance and increases pressure. But these are all vasodilators. These local metabolites, like uh, a decreased concentration of oxygen, increased concentration of carbon dioxide, decreased pH, histamine, bradykinin, nitric oxide. Okay, these are all some of the chemicals that called as local metabolites that are useful in increasing the diameter of the blood vessel. Okay, so these vasodilator, what they'll do, they'll increase the diameter, and when you increase the diameter, what happens? The resistance is decreased. Okay, and that would help in the decreasing the pressure as well. Now, of course, you have another system which is called the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. Now, this system is also, important in creating vasoconstriction and causing vasoconstriction, because there is a generation of what we call the angiotensin 2. We'll come back to this, all right, and resulting in vasoconstriction. So, aldosterone again is, part of this. I mean, it's again an outcome of this system, the RAS system. And aldosterone, it retains sodium and water. So by retaining sodium and water, it builds the blood volume, and when the blood volume is built, it increases mean systemic filling pressure, and therefore increases venous return and diastolic blood volume. So there is a connection here between these two. Okay, so these are all factors controlling the blood pressure. So we can divide Rather, we can categorize these mechanisms that regulate blood pressure. We generally categorize them into short-term, immediate, and long-term. The short-term are the baroreceptor reflexes, chemoreceptor reflexes, and the ischemic response, which is seen as ischemic response, which I had discussed with you in the last class. Okay, so these are, when I was discussing the control of the cardiovascular system, I had mentioned you about these, reflexes. Then you have the hormones, like the catecholamines, again the hormonal system, which is called the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, all right, which help in the intermediate, short-term or intermediate control. And vasopressin, which we also call as the antidiuretic hormone, this also helps in the intermediate control of the blood pressure. Then the long-term control is the renal body fluid control system. It is something like an intrinsic mechanism. This is kind of an a renal intrinsic mechanism. Okay, and it results actually, it results out of the pressure that is, the pressure that is there in the that is developing in the system itself. Okay, so we have, when we talk of the regulation of blood pressure, we therefore have three categories. One, short-term or rapid category. Two, short-term or something called as immediate category, and long-term. Right, when blood pressure is rising for a long period of time, and uh, this is a system that will come into effect and control the pressure. But when the pressure is elevated as a result of, let's say, a change in posture, which is something that is transient only, happening only for a moment, or maybe change in as a result of activity, there may be change in chemical concentration. Okay, and something like ischemic response, which is otherwise called as a mass ditch response, that happens when um, pressure falls extremely below. I mean below, say, the mean artery pressure. Okay, falls below 40 millimeters of mercury. Then this response is going to be invoked. Okay, so, and hormones take part in the intermediate control. They form a kind of an intermediate control system. Okay, I don't think I should discuss the baroreceptor reflexes because I had discussed last time. But anyway, I'll go through again this. We have a slide. I'll be talking about the baroreceptor reflexes, the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, and then you would also see, as in the same slide, how vasopressin helps in the control of blood pressure, and as well as the renal body fluid control system. Okay. Anyway, let's go through these flow charts. So you have an increased blood pressure, baroreceptors will be stimulated. All right. So we have baroreceptors in the carotid sinus, aortic arch, and you have these nerve fibers, originating from these baroreceptors. You have here the vagus and the glossopharyngeal. They will be carrying this, information to the nucleus tractus solitarius. Now, the nucleus tractus solitarius is a sensory component uh, of the medullary control, cardiovascular control system. Okay, so a system that controls brainstem. It's a brainstem system that controls the functioning of the heart. Okay, so anyway, so it stimulates the sensory component of this, which is a nucleus tractus solitarius, and then information is relayed from here to the to the different components of the cardiac center. So what happens that when the nucleus tractus solitarius is stimulated, it in turn stimulates the cardioinhibitory center. And when this happens, the cardioaxillary center, which is present in the rostro ventral lateral medulla, okay, is inhibited. So this center, which is a cardio-axillary center, all right, is something like a sympathetic system. It's in some books also referred to as the vasomotor center. This is a system that is continuously discharging, rather generating impulses, and these impulses are carried by the sympathetic nerve to the heart and the blood vessels, and therefore controlling the beating of the heart. But it is said that when nucleus tractus solitarius is stimulated, it stimulates this part, cardioinhibitory center, and this depresses the function of the rostro rostroventral lateral medulla. Okay, and when that happens, there will be a sympathetic inhibition. Okay, and stimulating cardioinhibitory center would result in increased vagal stimulation. And when you have these two happening, increased vagal stimulation would depresses the generation of impulses from the pacemakers, and therefore decreases the heart rate. Okay, and because sympathetic inhibition is also being invoked, what happens that the rate as a result of this decreases, stroke volume also falls, and in a blood vessel you would see vasodilation, and all these will result into a fall in the cardiac output, a fall in the total peripheral resistance, and then when you have depression of these two determinants, that would result in the fall in the blood pressure. So this is how the baroreceptors control the rise of blood pressure on an immediate, or rather from time to time, from every time we stand, or we we sit, we change in posture, there would be some elevation of blood pressure, but that will be brought back to normal, right? And so to maintain what we call the homeostasis, isn't it? And a system that brings back blood pressure to normal is this, all right, on a minute to minute basis, all right. So minute to hours, minute to minute basis. Basically, it's a minute to minute basis. Okay. So you have this system which is called as a short-term, rapid, you know, system controlling the blood pressure. So like baroreceptor mechanism, you have chemoreceptor mechanism also, which behaves, in a similar way, depressing the, rather there you'd see as a result of a fall in the oxygen concentration, a rise in the carbon dioxide concentration, there you'd see a different outcome, where there would be increased kind of heart rate, so as to increase uh, the transportation of these two gases, and correct the fall, as well as the fall of the fall of oxygen, and the elevation of carbon dioxide. Correct that, and through the respiratory system. Okay. So what happens that there the respiratory center would be stimulated, but with baroreceptor stimulation, the respiratory centers are inhibited. So there is actually respiratory depression when baroreceptors are stimulated, and there is respiratory center activation when the chemoreceptors are activated. Okay, so that's the difference. But then they still, are factors controlling the blood pressure, because they also have a role in in controlling the cardiac center and the medulla. Now you have this hormonal component. Now, as I've already highlighted in the earlier slide, we said that hormones like the antidiuretic hormone, and then you have another hormone which calls the antidiuretic peptide hormone, which is you know synthesized and secreted by the atrial cells, I mean cells in the atrium, right? And then you have the renin-angiotensin aldosterone system. Okay, these are a set of hormones that create a system. Okay, that controls the blood pressure. So you see, when you have a rise in the blood pressure, and you have a number of things happening. One is increased pressure would increase perfusion. So you will have an increased renal perfusion. Okay, so increased renal perfusion that will lead to, now it is a long-term rise in pressure. This is this perfusion. I mean, the renal perfusion would be the main mechanism that would help in controlling the pressure. Okay, so actually this is a long term. This one is a long term, but then the hormones that will be stimulated here are the renin. The renin, as you know, it would stimulate angiotensin 1, which is present in the plasma, and then when it reaches the lung, in the presence of what it calls angiotensin converting enzyme, it will convert to angiotensin 2, and angiotensin 2 has a number of action. I will be again highlighting, I think, in the next slide. Yes, here as you can see, angiotensin 2, what does it do? It is a potent vasoconstrictor. It absorbs sodium from proximal convoluted tubule, and it stimulates secretion of aldosterone. It evokes thirst. It stimulates secretion of vasopressin. Potent vasoconstrictor. This can cause increased peripheral vascular resistance. The absorption of sodium from proximal convoluted tubule would result in increased blood volume. Okay, it increases the blood volume or the extracellular fluid volume, and stimulation of secretion of aldosterone that also would increase sodium and water reabsorption. Again, that would result into increased extracellular fluid volume and blood volume, and evokement of thirst that would also have an effect on the blood volume, increase the blood volume as a result of increased intake of fluid and water. And stimulation secretion of vasopressin, as you know, vasopressin causes the conservation of water by increasing the reabsorption of water from the distal convoluted tubule. Okay, so there will be increased reabsorption of water, and all these are all factors. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are all factors that will increase the extracellular fluid volume. All right, and when you build up the volume, you are going to build up the pressure. You're going to build up cardiac output, and then therefore you're going to build up the pressure. So there will be increased pressure. So foreign pressure is corrected by all these, resulting in the rise in pressure. So same here with the with the potent vasoconstrictor also, because there, of course, in this case, it is not related to building up the volume, but it's related to increasing the resistance. So when you increase the resistance, you're also increasing the pressure. So it's actually, um, affecting the hemodynamics. Now, we come back to this slide. Okay. So you will see that besides the renin-angiotensin system, you have the antidirected hormone or the vasopressin, all right, which is, and we have, I think this I have already discussed in the earlier slide. So that helps in the conservation of water, builds up the blood volume. But then you have another hormone which is generated from the atrium, which is called the anti-natriuretic peptide. So by the name itself suggests that it prevents the excretion of sodium and water. Understand? So it prevents it prevents excretion of sodium and water as well. So when you do this, you're going to increase the extracellular fluid volume within the body, and then that would help in increasing the blood volume, and that would help in correcting the blood pressure. So either I got it wrong. And anti-natriuretic peptide increases sodium and water excretion. So when sodium and water is excreted, what happens is that there would be a fall in the volume. Okay, it's only when you It's only when when you retain these two, you are going to build up the volume. Here, you're not going to build up the volume. I'm sorry. You're going to, bring down the volume. Okay. So you're going to decrease the volume, the extracellular fluid volume, and therefore decrease the pressure. So here also, increase blood pressure would result in a decreased antidiuretic hormone secretion and then decreased absorption of water from collecting tubule. And so this system actually, these three systems, you know, rather these two, one and two, would correct not only particularly this antidiuretic hormone system, okay, would correct the pressure if it's rising or pressure if it's falling. Alright, just by regulating the absorption of water or the reabsorption of water, as we can call it. Okay, same here also. If we, manipulate the secretion of atrial natriuretic peptide, then we can also manipulate the, excretion or retention of sodium and water, and therefore we can, uh, manipulate the blood pressure. Fine. Now, these are all hormonal, all right? But then I was talking about the renal intrinsic mechanism. Now, that is one system that can control blood pressure, which is which has been which has been, present or elevated for a long period of time. This is the only way by which, the body can bring down the pressure. So it is totally a kidney dependent, mechanism. So what happens that increased pressure result in increased renal perfusion, and increased renal perfusion would result in increased glomerular rate filtration, or we call it glomerular filtration rate, sorry, the GFR, and uh, that would result in increased filtrate load, and anyway, there will be prevention of reabsorption of water and sodium, and there will be excretion of both sodium and water. And when you do this, you're going to bring down the extracellular fluid volume, and then you're going to correct the blood pressure. Okay, so this is very important mechanism, and we call this mechanism as a pressure diuretic mechanism or a pressure, natriuretic mechanism. Okay, I think I have discussed all the, you know, essential factors controlling the blood pressure. Okay, so you remember this, this one is in relation to exercise. I'm not going to, take this up. I think I would end it with this. Okay, and you must remember this slide. Okay, this is very important. Once you have this in mind, then you'll be able to write about the different ways by which the blood pressure can be regulated. Okay, so you can have these short-term rapid, short-term immediate, and long-term. So you read about these more and more in books, in your textbook. It is there. All right, actually there are more. We have more factors controlling the arterial blood pressure. Okay, but then these are the important ones. If you can, write on these, it'll be more than sufficient. Okay, we have a long list. There is a long list of all, factors controlling the, blood pressure. All factors controlling the, cardiovascular systems are all factors controlling the blood pressure as well. Is it clear? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
sir.
Okay. So I think you can
Yes,
use these
sir.
slides. You can use these slides, and then you must read your textbook. That is important. Okay. And let me
Yes, sir.
see if we still have anything more to discuss on cardiovascular system. We'll do that next week again. So this
Right,
is a
sir.
very important. This is a very important topic. Okay. Regulation of blood pressure is a
Yes,
very
sir.
important topic, and you must know it because it's a basis for you to later when you're learning about blood pressure and all that, how you should treat blood pressure, isn't it? Hypertension and all that. You must have this physiological basis in your mind. Okay, this should form a kind of a background. Okay, should always be there in your mind. Okay,
Thank you, sir.
all right. Okay, bye, bye, and thank you,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
thank you,
Thank you, sir.
thank you, thank you. Bye, bye.